So my guest on today's CCA Emerging Leaders interview series is Gloria Asare, Toronto affiliate leader for the International Association of Black Actuaries. In this last segment, Gloria, I want to turn and talk a little bit more about leadership. That's one of the reasons why we have this interview series, is to get people's thoughts on leadership and what they've seen works, what they have seen that doesn't necessarily work. But specifically, because we've been talking a lot about the International Association of Black Actuaries today, I want to get your view on the importance of diversity in leadership. What are the benefits and what are the difficulties?
There are huge benefits of diversity in leadership. And I think actually the way I think about it is that there are huge disadvantages to not having diversity in leadership. I think it's well known that McKinsey and other companies have done studies literally showing that more diverse leadership teams leads to better top and bottom line results. But then even outside of that, when you don't have a diverse leadership team, you are literally subtly, or maybe not so subtly, sending the message that unless you are this particular type of person, you can't be a leader. But yet we are operating in environments where we have diverse people, we're operating on global scales, but then we're just reserving this affluent, enviable position to only a certain class or a certain type of person, which just naturally isn't really the most enlightened and fairest way to go about things. But outside of that, um, uh, you get the diversity of thought, you get the diversity of opinions, you get a more inclusive workplace. You are sending the message to people that it is merit based, that that we are open to everybody. Anyone can be this leader. There are many benefits in that sense.
And I guess, what do you see as the barriers of having more diversity in leadership then?
I would say that it comes down to a lot this term, which I know a lot of people have heard a lot, in terms of systemic racism, because just the means by which we've just gotten so used to operating in society and operating in work, it's just so ingrained in us that, oh, this is the way things are. You don't actually notice that there's a problem unless you really step aside to take a look at it. um I think about a couple of studies that come to mind, which actually one of the really great speakers we had at last year's annual meeting spoke to, and there is a recording on IABA's YouTube page that covers exactly this and has her session. But for instance, she talked about how a lot of times she's Dr. Valerie Perdery Greenway, and she's a professor at Columbia University in psychology. And she talked about this study that shows that a lot of times diverse or Black people end up staying in mid-level management positions for a much longer time than their non-diverse peers. And that's because they're seen as an at-risk group. They have to do more to prove themselves that they are a safe bet to be worth getting the promotion. And because of that, that's just one example of like a company practice that isn't written on paper, that isn't advertised anywhere, that literally impacts the lives of your diverse talent that you have working for you. That's one challenge. Another thing she spoke about is the teddy bear effect, and how literally depending on your look, and like another study that talked about your look and how friendly you come across, that's a direct correlation with how successful you can end up being as a diverse person at work. If you have a cuter, rounder face, it's surprising, but seriously, if you have like a rounder, if you look more like, a cute teddy bear, or a rounder, more friendly, warm shape to your face, that has an impact. Why should that have an impact? Um, so there's so many unwritten rules that are at play that lead to an unfortunate and disparate treatment of different employees in terms of aspiring to a certain level that really shouldn't be the case. And so I think that's also why one thing I want to mention is that IABA, DE&I initiatives, they're not about taking away from one group to give to another. It's about people expanding their views and just picking the best talent, picking the best people for the job, and realizing that there's a broad definition to what the best is. It's not just one path, it's not just one way, it's not just one means.
I think the other interesting thing about that too is that I think probably there's a lot of employers or people in leadership out there that would probably say, well, I'm not, intentionally trying to put anybody down or not allow people to promote at the same rate, and so we don't have a problem. But in reality, I think part of the issue that we're trying to combat here is less about the negative consequences that people might say, well, we don't have any of that, so we're fine. And it's more about helping people understand that there are benefits to be gained that they're just not aware of by actually helping promote a diverse environment, not just for the company as a whole, but especially among the leadership ranks.
Exactly, that's absolutely true. And I mean, another example is no one ever says we're not going to consider, we make sure we don't consider any Black people for the job. That never happens. But when you have a job description or something that's very tailored to a specific type of person, such that it's exclusive to others, you only end up with particular people entering the pipeline where you could have had so much more diversity. I would say even another example is a lot of times in the work environment, mentoring happens organically. I think it was some point in future that the terms mentorship and sponsorship were officially defined beyond what had already just been naturally occurring in the office environment. If you normally relate and interact with people that look like you, and you promote them and you give them the stretch assignments and you give them the attention, and they do great and they grow, it's true, they've merited it, and that's and they are deserving of the role, they're equipped for the role. But if you did not give others those same opportunities to grow in a similar way, then they'll never have the opportunity to be ready for some of those more senior positions. So that's why we also advocate reaching out and being a sponsor to someone who's diverse, and just reaching out and networking outside of your regular circles. Those are just some basic examples for how diverse talent can be pulled along on the train.
No, I like that. So maybe we can elaborate a little bit more on that theme as well. So how can someone from a majority ethnicity be a better ally to people from diverse backgrounds? So we talked about the mentorship aspect of things. Are there other things that people in the majority can do?
Mentorship aspect, sponsorship aspect, in terms of looking for a sponsor that's not like yourself. Another thing too is to speak out against and prevent, like, all these workplace jokes and things that are insensitive to others from happening. A lot of times something awkward will happen and people will be like, oh, I'm not going to say that, or it wasn't very nice of that person to say that, but I'm not going to say anything. But then it leaves the diverse person that was in the group or that overheard it from the cafeteria to have to speak up for themselves, or come up and confront that person and then get labeled the angry Black person. And it's like, as hard as it is for you to speak up against something that's happening, it's even harder for the diverse person that's been targeted or was insulted or offended by that joke or whatever it was that was said. So that's one means. And again, I think that in terms of other examples, I really think that it's just about talking to people. It's just about reaching out. If you know that you have an employee who's either from a different country, a different state, diverse in some way, do a little bit of research on where they're from, spark a conversation, help them feel included and like they belong in that team and they belong in your workplace as they are, not that they have to hide a certain part of themselves in order to fit in.
Yeah, no, I really like that. So as you think about your role as a leader within your organization and the profession, especially with your roles with IABA, what adjustments have you personally had to make to be successful as a leader? I mean, clearly you've got some nice roles. You're head of pricing at the company that you're at right now in Canada. What have you had to do to adjust as you've moved throughout your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am extremely grateful to AIBA for the leadership positions that I've had up until this point, which have had a direct benefit in my work life as well. But I would say it's about realizing that the people you're working with are human beings and they're not robots, they're not machines, that, everyone has their personal challenges that they're dealing with in their lives. And so you have to understand that and trust that people are well-meaning. Sometimes things get in the way, sometimes things pop up, but you believe in that person. If you can have a relationship with your team where you believe in them, you trust them, and you're motivated to work together towards something that's important, something that has meaning, something that'll bring change, something that's not just superficial or being done for the sake of being done. I think that's really the way that you get great buy-in to be able to achieve great things.
No, I like that. I appreciate that perspective as well. All right. Well, thank you again, Gloria, for joining me today. We have a few minutes left. If people have any questions, they feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel or into the chat. We're looking at both of those. But what I guess thinking a little bit more about the leadership aspect of things. So we talked about what it means to be a good ally to people from diverse backgrounds. Have you had any experiences or maybe even stories from other Black actuaries about people that were maybe well-intentioned allies but really didn't end up benefiting the person they were trying to be an ally to?
That's a great question.
So basically, like maybe to say another way, what should somebody not do if they're looking to be an ally to people from diverse backgrounds?
Great. Okay. So firstly, they shouldn't put their diverse colleagues right on the spot. Like suddenly something happens in the news and someone you don't relate to or interact with much is suddenly at your desk asking you to speak on behalf of all Black people about, current events. So not to do things like that, just because there are Black or other diverse employees in the company doesn't mean that we're all experts on the field of racism or that we're comfortable talking about it. Talking about personal experiences with racism can be very sensitive, and people might be selective in terms of who they choose to share that with. So I would not suggest putting anyone on the spot with questions regarding that. And I would say that especially allies who are in positions to be able to execute on a DE&I initiative, that they should be well informed as to what they're doing. If this is something that has been put on you, but you don't feel equipped for the task, or you don't feel like you know enough about it, to speak up and say, hey, can I get some training? Can I get some information? What can we do so that I can learn more? It is so important to go about making this change the right way, and that requires you to be educated about what you're doing, not to only just have the sentiment that you want to help and that you want things to be better. You have to know how to go about it and get any resources or help that you need to do that.
Those are great examples. I appreciate that. My guest today has been Gloria Asare from the International Association of Black Actuaries. Thanks all of you for joining us and tuning in, and those of you that are listening to the recordings afterwards. I'd encourage you to check out the CCA's website, ccactuaries.org, for upcoming events and other activities that we'll have, not only on the Emerging Leaders interview series, but other webinars and events that we have coming up in the coming months. Gloria, again, thank you for taking the time and joining us, and appreciate all of your insight and perspective that you've shared with us today.
You're very welcome, Michael. Glad to be here.
Thanks, everyone, and have a nice day.